Good evening, everyone. As usual, our meeting is being Zoomed for those who wish to attend virtually and participate in public comment in that way. The definitive recording is available through CATV a day or two after the meeting. The Zoom connection is provided as a convenience. We hope it works for everyone. The information with the Zoom link is provided on the first page of the agenda, which is posted on the district website. Everyone, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I want to thank the superintendent and all the members of the staff and leadership team that helped to run the forum that we just completed, and hopefully that will provide good information and guidance for the next iteration of the strategic plan. So thanks to all of you for guiding us through on a really short timeline. Thank you. We will have public comment this evening according to policy BEDH. We'll get to that in a couple minutes. Additions, deletions from the agenda?
None that I'm aware of.
We do have a track update scheduled at some point during the meeting. The chair of the Track Fundraising Committee is currently in California, and she will join us. When she joins us, I'll ask the superintendent to let me know if she pops up among the participants, and at the next break in the action we'll ask her to give her report. If for some reason she can't attend or it doesn't work out, I'll get a report in writing and distribute it to the board. Okay, so we will have a non-public session tonight at the completion of item number 11 on the agenda. So after the track fundraising report or the city school joint task force, whatever comes last, we will go into non-public, and then we'll come back for the last couple items on the agenda. So is there any public comment for the board?
No hands raised.
No hands raised on Zoom. No one approaching the microphone here in the middle school cafeteria. Public comment is closed. Correspondence. Is there any correspondence, Lou?
No.
Thank you. For the consent agenda, may I please have a motion to approve the public meeting minutes from May 11th, 2022.
Make a motion to approve the public meeting minutes from May 11, 2022.
Second that.
Motion from MJ, second by Stephen. Are there corrections, questions, omissions? Anyone wants to point out?
I will note that before the meeting, our minute taker let me know that she's not feeling well, so she'll be taking the minutes off of our CATV recording.
Okay, seeing no hands raised for corrections, all in favor? 8-0. We have a spreadsheet of nominations, resignations provided by the superintendent. May I please have a motion to approve and or acknowledge this list?
I'll make a motion to approve the nominations and acknowledge the resignations from the list dated May 25th, 2022.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion by MJ, second by Stephen. Any questions for the superintendent on the contents of this list? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? None. 8-0. Moving on to the student report.
Good evening. My name is Miles Sturgis. I'm the moderator of the Lebanon High School Council, and I have a bit of an update. And I have a bit of an update on student life. All of the students and staff that I've talked to today are appalled by the tragedy that occurred yesterday in Texas. But nonetheless, good things are happening in the school. Students are excited for the end of the year. The seniors' last week is next week, and their last day is on Friday. And everyone's excited for end-of-year events, and the LHS sports teams are doing well. An update on council. We met today, our second to last meeting, where new council members for next year observed and learned our procedures and operations. Myself and two other council members, Duncan Green and Seth Danon, today we went to Plainfield Elementary School to promote council to the 8th graders there, because we have one spot reserved for incoming freshmen from Plainfield. And we also have a lot of interested students from the 8th grade at Lebanon Middle School currently, and those elections will take place shortly. Today in our meeting, we met with Dr. Roberts to discuss the strategic plan, and we really appreciate her attendance at multiple of our meetings throughout the year and involving us in those discussions. Council is currently looking at a possibility of something called a judiciary committee. It's something that Mary Rainey and I observed when we visited Hanover Council. And the purpose of the judiciary committee is to serve as an advisory body for questions on student discipline, and also to serve as a judicial body for discipline disputes. And that's just something we're looking into at the time. We also spoke with LHS administration about concerns with communications and messages about the Senior Tea event, and I think we got to a good conclusion there. Earlier this year, we created a gun violence ad hoc committee in response to, I don't remember the exact event, but an event that happened earlier this year. And today we decided to make it an ad hoc committee, but we changed the title to Student Wellness, and the committee will focus on gun violence, mental health, and other issues. This committee will meet outside of regular council meetings, and all students are welcome to, or staff, all students or staff are welcome to join. They don't have to be on council. And looking ahead, we're currently planning Springfest happening next Friday, the homecoming dance happening next fall, and planning fundraising efforts for next year.
Thanks, Miles. Questions? Sounds like you guys have been busy.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I note in the packet at this point, the resignation letter from the board of Renee DiPaolo is in here. While we're sort of between policies right now on school board member resignation, just by coincidence, one of the policies that we're doing a first read on tonight involves an expanded process for board member resignations, retirements, whatever. So I think we don't need to, we're still governed by the old policy, so we don't need to officially take any action. I think we can just acknowledge without taking a vote Renee's resignation. Thank you for her. We can thank her for her service. And we'll, under new business, future agenda items, we'll talk about the timing for that. We'll report where we are with that, but we'll do that before the end of the meeting. I just wanted to mention it now since her resignation letter was the next item in the packet. Okay, next up is the DDCIA update from Lisa Scalero.
Good afternoon. Good evening. Sunny out. It feels like it's afternoon still. As I begin my update, I just want to start by acknowledging that while I am sharing this update, the work that has happened is not my work. I'm here to update you on the work that our curriculum committees have done, and really it's our teachers who are not here to talk about the work that are doing the work that I'm speaking about, and I just want to thank them for all that work. I want to thank the administrators that sit on these teams as well. You know, I couldn't give you this update without all their hard work this year, so I just want to say a thank you. I also want to define the term curriculum as I go into this update. That word is used differently by different people and can mean different things to different people. When we use the term curriculum and we talk about curriculum development, we're talking about the process where we locally interpret our standards and decide what it is that we want all students to know and be able to do as they leave our classrooms. We call that our stage one, our desired results that we want for our learners. We then think about how we're going to assess our effectiveness. That's our stage two. And then we talk about the learning plan. How will we get our students to that end goal? That's where the terms instructional materials or program oftentimes come in. What are we going to use to teach those standards? I just want to clarify that because most of my updates about curriculum and the work we are doing here, but I am going to speak a little bit about how we're thinking about a new math resource and new math program, and that's the distinction. That's the resource we might use to teach our curriculum, not the curriculum itself. So my update is organized by where the content area is in our curriculum review cycle. Like all districts, we have a cycle that outlines what the content area is working on in regards to curriculum each year. So the first two items in the update are content areas in professional assessment, standards, and practices. That's the first sort of entry point in our curriculum cycle. English Language Arts launched this August. That was their first meeting. They began by drafting, sharing, and adopting a vision for English Language Arts in our district. They unpacked the Common Core state standards and developed student-focused I can statements in grades 5 through 12. They evaluated our current practices around argumentative, narrative, and informational writing and used those as entry points into thinking about our new units of instruction. They then went into the process of unitizing, or thinking about what a unit might look like, what standards should go together, what competencies we want to address, and what I can statements would support those standards and competencies. And then we worked to make sure we had a common understanding of the terms that we were using in our curriculum development. Similarly, we launched social studies in August as well. We had planned to start that group a little bit earlier and had been waiting for guidance from the state on new state standards. Our current state standards were adopted in 2006. And when that seemed like it was going to continue to be in stall mode, we decided to move forward on our own work here in Lebanon. Similarly, that group started thinking from a vision perspective. What would it look like for students when they graduate our district and have gone through 12 years of social studies instruction? So that was drafted, it was shared and adopted. The committee officially approved and adopted the C3, which is a national set of social studies standards to use locally. Those standards are not grade level specific. The C3 is organized by grade bands, K2, 3, 5, 6, 8. So one of the first tasks the committee had to do was to divide those standards more specifically into grade levels. Before the educators could think about what the I can statement might look like, they had to know in what grade level that content would be taught. That was the first task they undertook this year. Then they made sure that their scopes and sequences were developmentally appropriate, and then reviewed the I can statements vertically to ensure that their progression was student-centered and made sense. Those are the two sort of content areas that sit in that first part of our curriculum review cycle, so that first year. The next two content areas that are listed are in the second phase of our curriculum review cycle. So after we move through our professional assessment, looking at our local standards and practices, we begin to articulate and draft that curriculum. Science launched in 2019, the winter, right before we closed. And so while they should be further in our cycle, that stop in March of 2020 and the sort of year of AB hybrid set them back a little bit. So they are still sitting in articulate and draft. They have completed all I can statements, 5 through 12. They also had to place standards in grade levels. NGSS, or the Next Generation Science Standards, are grade banded at the middle school and high school. And so they had to also do that work of what standard would go in what grade level. They spent time reviewing those ideas 5th to 6th, and then 8th to 9th, either biology or physical science, to ensure we didn't have redundancies, but appropriate repetition and deepening. They've done the work of developing common understanding of our curricular terms and have started to unitize the courses. World language is the one that's the farthest forward. They began in 1920. They had completed all their I can statements at the start of the year, and almost all of the grade levels and courses are done with their units, their draft units. I came to the board in the beginning of 2020, and we approved a new math curriculum. 2020, yes, that's right, as we returned an AV hybrid. And so we didn't do a lot with math that first year. This year, math entered the third phase of our curriculum review cycle, which is this professional collaboration year. The time in which our teachers are able to unpack the work that was done broadly, try out assessments, talk about pacing. And we did that work this year by implementing curricular-focused staff meetings 1 Tuesday a month, where the work was primarily on curriculum work. Our math teachers met across schools if they were at the elementary level. They sometimes met 512. They sometimes met 5-8 and 912. This April, we launched a committee, our K-8 Math Resource Adoption Team, that is beginning to review instructional materials that we believe will best support us in implementing this curriculum moving forward. This summer, this June, we will review specific materials and then do a pilot next year in order to determine what we believe is the best resource for us moving forward. In my update, I have talked a lot about 5 through 12. In our original plan, we anticipated running all of our curriculum teams K-12. We realized fairly early on this year that our elementary teachers were being pulled in too many directions. And at every curricular meeting, we kept coming back to, well, how does the ELA connect to the science, connect to the social studies? And so these disparate committees weren't making sense because we couldn't think thoughtfully about an elementary approach to curriculum. So we're launching our curriculum work in ELA, science, and social studies slightly differently at the elementary level. And we're going to tackle that from an interdisciplinary lens. When we're doing informational writing, what is the appropriate science or social studies topic that we want to connect to that writing? Same with when we're doing argumentative writing. And so that work is going to begin this June, and that will take a little while. Our ELA, science, social studies, and world language committees have all drafted goals for this summer. And we have put out the request to staff who would like to participate on that work this summer. And then we will begin essential arts work this August. Those committees have not yet launched. And that is sort of a summary of where we are at this point in the year. I'm happy to take questions.
Questions for Lisa?
I just had a very quick vocabulary question. Yeah, is that working? Can you tell me what you mean when you say unitizing the material, or?
And I'm not even sure that's a real word. But what I mean is taking the standards, right? Let's say you have 20 standards at your grade level. It's really thinking about which standards should go together in the packet in which we're going to assess. So I want to put these standards together because I believe the big idea that connects all of these makes sense for a learner, and that's the unit. And at the end of that unit, I would have I'd have an assessment. So it's sort of the bucket by which we package our ideas. I'm not sure unitization is actually a word. It's a Lisaism, I think.
Other questions?
I echo the appreciation for your work and for all the teachers and administration that just kept things going. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before you go, Lisa, I had a question.
Oh, please.
So you're launching a new position, and it's going to be a key position for the district in terms of our DEI activities. You're going to be interacting with the to-be-hired social worker, as well as the SRO and other. You have a lot on your plate. So I guess my question is, if you could tonight, give us a few thoughts on what do you think are, from the perspective of your position, our general plan of action should be. Maybe this is fortuitous because we've just been talking about the strategic plan, But for your position specifically, what do you see as being on your plate and general course of action for the coming year?
Well, I think your point to the strategic plan is sort of important. I think it's one way we document where we're thinking we need to go as a district connected to our work on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I really think they're very deeply connected. The idea of sense of belonging and how our students and our staff are able to be their most authentic selves here is deeply connected to then the learning that they're able to do in the classrooms. And so it's in some ways very hard to pull all of that apart because it very much is interwoven. We need to think about how we remove the barriers for all members of our community. We need to think about the instructional practices that we know are the most high leverage that can simultaneously foster a sense of belonging and ensure that all of our learners are successful. And so I think really those two buckets of the strategic plan, that sense of belonging and equitable access, are the drivers of the work moving forward. I don't know if that's
Any
what you're
follow-up questions from
looking
anyone?
for.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
Moving on to the superintendent update.
Sorry, I just need to get to the right page. Starting with our health and safety, masking continues to be voluntary. Masks are available for staff members and students in all of our schools. I met with our nurses to talk about current cases and information to provide to staff and families. We've ordered more home tests. I have a last round to pick up from Concord that is free to districts, and we will order more based on the needs. And our nurses continue to update the SAU dashboard. As far as the renovation projects at Mount Leb, meetings continue with Marinese Architects and Ekman Contractors. Based on the new renovation design and updated bids, CRF and end-of-year funds will be needed to move the project forward, and there's information in this packet that we'll talk about. At the high school and Hanover Street School, the architects are working on design plans through the summer, and they're making good progress on those plans. For P&N, this evening we'll be voting to ratify or approve the Lebanon School District, and they used to be called the Secretaries Association, but even prior to ratifying it, we hopped right on it, and they'll be called the Lebanon School District Administrative Assistants Union. And once again, the board will ratify or vote to ratify the agreement this evening. We reviewed policies and put policies in this packet for review. I've been in communication with Grantham and Plainfield superintendents regarding the area meeting. I'm not quite sure why it was canceled yesterday evening, but we learned late in the day that it was canceled. And communications with the board to keep them up to date. Under other, I facilitated the meeting with SALT to finalize the draft strategic plan. We're meeting tomorrow, so we'll take everything that we heard today and put it into the plan as best as we can. As Miles mentioned, I met with the council to talk about the draft strategic plan. I met with DAO to review the draft strategic plan and organization of the community forum. The middle school 8th grade science teachers are finalizing the next steps for the new course offering this fall. There's an email folder for Lebanon residents interested in the interim board position. I met with Lisa to talk about math curriculum review and the board update this evening. Participated in the city school joint task force meeting, and not in the area meeting because I send these in advance and that was canceled last night. I talked with and responded to questions from LEA and LSS, our two unions. Forwarded information to staff about upcoming suicide awareness and prevention training. Conversation with the city manager about diversity and equity work. Conversation with the Hanover Street School principal regarding staff matter. Conversation and follow-up with the middle school principal, director of CIA at the high school, and Lisa, and New Hampshire Ed Department regarding teaching endorsements and certifications. Communication with the social worker about onboarding. Communication with a parent regarding course offerings. Communicated with superintendent from another district regarding hiring a teacher. Communication with NHSBA following up on policy committee questions. Communication with city clerk regarding taking oaths. Communication with Grantham Superintendent regarding information shared by the middle school and the high school per the area agreement this school year, and we're all set with that. Provided information and principals' comments to the Lebanon Times for the next article. I wanted to focus on gratitude. Communication with Mount Lev principal regarding a student and staff matter. Conversation with the high school principal regarding upcoming end-of-year events. Responded to questions regarding the STEM internship. Followed up with Mount Lev and Hanover Street principals regarding after-school programming next year. We're going to be signing a contract. We want to do that within this week so that we can make sure that we're all set for next year with the same organization that's doing it this year. Communication with Director of Student Services regarding a request from another district regarding student matters. Once again, this is not everything that I've done, but these are just kind of highlights of things I wanted to provide to the board. As the sun is streaming right into my eyes, are there any questions that you might have?
No questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Business Administrator update, Tim.
Good evening. I'm going to be talking about the next few pages together sort of as a package as we lead into new business A. Excuse me. So I included the monthly report. It's very similar to previous months. It's been trending. There's been no surprises really that I think that I could notice that we've been talking about this right along. We do have a significant amount of funds that will be left at the end of this year. As I've done in the past, I will be providing an analysis of where and why we had money left. I usually provide that before, when we return in the fall, before budgeting. I can say that many districts are experiencing larger than usual fund balances. Some of it is associated with operations during COVID, but I'm sure not all of it. So I'll have a breakdown for you to the best of my ability. Please remember that this budget was made, it sounds like forever ago, but this budget was made in the first few weeks of our return to classes in the fall of 20. So we went on break in March for the rest of the school year. We came back in September 8th, I think it was, of 2020, and we dove into this budget. So here we are, seems like 2 years later, and we're just finishing up that budget. So I've mentioned before that seeing numbers that big is a little frustrating. So I'm going to break that down and show you, but it looks like it's a blessing in disguise this year based on what we're going to talk about next. So that's the revenue. That's the expenditure side. What I included this time is a revenue piece. Revenue is, as part of the budget, we say this is where we're going to get our money from. And this again was set in the fall of 20, and we have excess revenue of $197,000. That'll flow through unfund balance. The one thing I wanted to say about that was, I don't know if you may not remember now, but right at the end of budget time, we got numbers we usually get numbers from the DOE and Ed, New Hampshire Ed, whatever it's called now. We get numbers saying this is what your revenue is going to be for adequacy aid in the next year. So when you came into our budget meeting before Thanksgiving, I gave you an updated revenue sheet that showed a decrease in revenue projections. That was based on free and reduced lunch numbers in the fall of 20. It was a problem across the state. So that's the revenue numbers that went into this budget. After that, in the spring of 21, the legislature passed legislation to restore everybody's adequacy aid numbers back to pre-pandemic levels. So obviously that's after the budget was passed, and that's good news because we got the money that we usually get. But that's why there's an extra revenue versus what was budgeted, because we had to budget for what we knew at the time. And the legislature fixed a problem that was nobody's fault. So we have an excess revenue of $197,000. I would note that there were several categories that were under budget, meaning we didn't get, and I guess the packet's black and white. So I said red indicates less than budget, black indicates, so now you have to look at the parentheses. If it's parentheses in that box on the right, that means less than budget. So we brought in a little less tuition than we thought. The big one there is earnings on investment, so we budget for what our checking accounts will make in interest. And the $75,000 budget looks really aggressive, but it wasn't when we did this, but interest rates that banks are paying have decreased significantly, so that's unfortunate. You'll notice in the budget coming up, I lowered that figure to recognize that. And we took a little less in rental income, as you might imagine, versus what we had budgeted early on. So all in all, and finishing above revenue is certainly better than below. So those two pieces, that under expended money and extra revenue, go into the fund balance at the end of the year. And we talked about this last year. Any excess revenue has to flow back to the taxpayers. It effectively flows back through the $1 million we already budgeted return. So I don't want to get too complicated, but I just wanted to show you how those two pieces go together. And so the last piece that I wanted to talk about was the year-end fund balance picture.
Before you move on
I'm
to
sorry,
that,
yep.
Tim, would you take questions on the first two
Of course, I'm
spreadsheets?
sorry, yes.
Anyone have any questions on the expenditures of the revenues before we delve into what we're going to do with the extra money? I had a couple, Tim. What's the? It was good news that the adequacy aid was restored. We knew that was coming. It's good to see what it actually is. What's the catastrophic aid? 126,000 over budget.
So you see that we budgeted, so that's, I really need to label that in the computer, because that's now called special ed aid. And so we budgeted 310,000, but that is, there's a formula that goes in how much your special ed costs were like the previous year or a couple years. And so that's a number, so we're given a range to budget from the DRA. Do you want to budget at the low end or the high end? It could be anywhere in here. So I always budgeted the low end to be conservative. So 310,000 was the low end of what we could get. And we ended up with 437,000. It's really based on what we spent the previous year. And I could budget a higher number, but again, I don't like to over budget and expect revenue we don't get, so.
Right. And that's called a catastrophe?
It used to be
It's called
Really?
special ed aid now.
catastrophic aid.
Really?
I think catastrophic to your budget is the idea, like you can really your budget.
Really? Yeah, that's,
I mean, it's before my time, but that's what I was.
yeah. All right.
We're gonna change that, it's called special ed aid now, I think, so.
My other question was on the earnings on investments. That's just bank interest? That nothing else is included in that?
So the money we make on our capital reserve fund stuff is not included in here, that's actually kept on different books. So this is interest, we were getting 2.5% interest, believe it or not, on our bank accounts, which is
Really?
payroll, AP, and we have some money on deposit with the New Hampshire Public Deposit Investment Program, or bank, I think it's program. So they were giving us 2.5% interest since I got here, but over the last year, that's been cut a lot, so.
Well,
Yeah.
did it go down to 1/10%? I mean, that's a heck of a drop.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. But,
Yeah.
I will find out.
Well, yeah, I mean, it would be useful for predicting.
Yeah.
That's all I have. Anybody have anything else?
I have a couple of small questions just about the expenditures. So the transportation, like we never use the transportation because you haven't had enough bus drivers this year. Is that gonna stay in the budget though for, I mean, now it's under expended, but I assume, I mean, hoping that next year it will be expended. And then the other question was just about the food service, because I'm not really sure what's happening with the food service, because this year we had the free meals, and I think that program is ending. Is that right?
So first about the buses, what's budgeted for this year is Paula and I went through the roster of drivers and vacancies, and so what's budgeted this year is not just who's on staff, but who's on staff plus who we would have if we had a full fleet. And that's the budget that starts July 1. This budget was actually more of default budget, meaning that we just had some staffing numbers we ran with for quite a while, and actually it reflected more drivers than we've had in a long time, and more drivers than we're asking for. We have enough barely to do our job. We need like three more full-time drivers. This budget, I think, has like 3 more on top of that, which it shouldn't have had, so that's my correction, but the budget coming up is desired for a fully a full staff, which is going to be, well, the challenges. We have some drivers retiring, and we're concerned about that too, but it's a different issue. Food service, yes, the free and reduced lunch, universal free meals has not been renewed by Congress. So as of now, we're planning on going back to our regular free and reduced lunch program in the fall. So for those who are eligible for free and reduced lunch, they'll see no change. For those who aren't eligible, yeah, they will be expected to pay. Yeah.
Anything else? All right, go ahead, Tim, with the end of year.
Okay, so on the thing that says fund balance, that should be, I think it's the next one in your packet. Yeah. So unexpended, and I put in there, you'll see that number is $100,000 lower. So this report was done 10 days ago. So I reduced the unexpended number by $100,000. It's really admittedly conservative, but I wanted to make sure that in case some encumbrance came up in the next 8 weeks, or 7 weeks at the time, I think it was, that we were covered. So I did reduce that number for purposes of being conservative. I want to show you that these numbers work and what we're talking about with some margin. Because the most important thing to me, as you might imagine, is to make sure that I don't ask you to do something with year-end funds that we can't do. So starting with a number that's lower than that expenditure report you just told you, and then encumbering as we usually do, or accounting for some P-card transactions and stuff that may not be in a PO at all. That's another $25,000. So I reduced that unexpended number to 2,435, and it is $125,000 lower than the report we just looked at. And hopefully you understand why. I added in the extra revenue, so the unassigned fund balance with this scenario is $2.6 million. We've already talked about reserving the voters approved $600,000 to go to the capital reserve fund. Then our budget is assuming $1 million to offset taxes. So that leaves available $1,032,000. If you reserve $750,000 for Mount Leb, that still gives $282,000. And that's important to me because the auditor, I was telling Joanne the other day, the auditors come in the third week in September, and they look at all of our expenditures for last year, and they always look forward a couple months. So and not usually, but a couple years ago, you probably remember that we had a bond payment that's due. We always have a bond payment that's due July 8th. And 2 years ago, we cut a check. We're doing it at ACH now, but we cut a check the last week in June to have it delivered first thing in July, right after the holiday. It got there a day early, believe it or not. The bank cashed it the last day of June. The auditors made me take that whole bond payment and apply it to the year that, even though it was a new fiscal year, they're like, the check was cashed in June, you're applying it to June. So, I mean, you got to do what they say. They're the accountants, and we have to. So when I say there's $282,000 left there, that's in recognition that sometimes the auditors see things that they want changed. They'll look forward in our expenditures in July and August, and I try to do a very good job of not paying a bill in the wrong month. But if I can't defend something we did, then they may make an adjustment. So that the $750,000 can still be paid and still have the margin enough to make sure that we're closing our books correctly. That's the whole point of this whole story, and I hope I made that clear. So, I mean, you could say, well, why not give them $1 million? Well, the margin's gone there, so that's why I don't want to do that. That's what I'm saying.
Questions about that? Tim, what happens if, when you close the books, that $282,000 is still there, and it's just given back to the taxpayers?
Goes back to the taxpayers.
So instead of $1 million, it's 1.2 million.
1.2, correct. Right. So yeah, that's a good question, and so there's no, we can't keep it, so it has to go back. And that ties in, if you want to go into the next one, it ties into the Mount Leb discussion. Or you can skip the year-end project list has two things on it. All right, so that's the next one in your packet. $700,000 is, you'll see the math in the next sheet. $700,000 would get the Mount Leb project done. There are redesign fees, and I put a note in there, estimated $10,000 to a structural engineer, $10,000 to a civil engineer, $20,000 to the architect, and $10,000 that's reserved for some other redesign fee we're not thinking of. So $50,000 to redesign means we went out to bid, the numbers came back, the numbers were too high for us to handle. So we asked the architect and the engineers to design a different project, as we talked about last time. Well, they don't do that stuff for free. So that would cost the redesign fees. That would cost the redesign, and then $700,000 would go, you'll see that on the next page, that to get this project done, we need $1.4 million. And 700 is part of that. And that's, any questions, or maybe you have questions after we go over to the next page?
Yeah, I got a question.
Yeah.
You know off the top of your head how much we paid Marinese with all these redesigns?
Not off the top of my head.
Yeah,
The kind,
it's more than 50,000.
Should be buy one, get one free.
yes.
Oh, I mean, it's,
I can run-
my
I
guess
can
is
run
we're
a
talking
report.
several hundreds of thousands of dollars before ground's even been broken.
True. So in October of '21, the board approved $4,063,000 for the entire Mount Lab project, NPR, kitchen, nurse's office, work in the behavior support room. You see $4,063,000. We are gonna do ESER 2 and ESER 3 of basically 2.4 of it. You can see the number 2398. And we're gonna use capital reserve of 1.6. And then on 121, so construction breakdown, the budget we got from Marinese on 121 had already removed the front entrance, and was feasible for $4,063,000. That's what it says in the middle of the page on the left. When estimates came back on 520, this is our conversation last week, reducing the size of the multipurpose room. It's really the only change. The front office has already decided we couldn't afford that. We've reduced the size of the multipurpose room, which changes a lot of the structural work, et cetera. They can do that for $4,905,000, so that's $1.4 million. The next part is confusing. What I was trying to say there is we need $50,000 of redesign fees, so the total is $1,450,000. So what we're proposing is the board approves end-of-year funds of $750,000. We just spent time going over. The $600,000 that's going in the capital reserve that initially was just going to sit there and build interest. We're going to put the money in after we close the books, because the 1.6 that was already dedicated is already in the account. So we're going to put 600 grand in there and use it for, start building that interest up again. This would take that $600,000 out again to use for the Mount Lab project. It would be a few months. Like, all this money's not due at once, as you might imagine. And then there's, in that project of $4,905,000 above, there's $230,000 roughly of food service equipment in there. We can use food service fund money to buy food equipment. That's part of the fund's reason. So we can take $100,000 from the food service account and basically buy half the equipment off the food service fund instead of out of this building fund. So those three things to get you to $1.4 million, 1.45. So that's the math behind it.
Go ahead, MJ.
So can you walk me through the food service then? Because I thought we were going to repurpose a lot of the stuff. So you're saying that there's still about $200,000 in equipment that we need to purchase, of
Right.
which $100,000 would come from food service. So what happened to how much was the equipment going to cost in the first place?
The number of new equipment, now they're going to the only information I can provide you now is that they're going to repurpose everything in the kitchen they possibly can. But there's still, we have to buy 2 big walk-in coolers, and there's some, it's not just a stove, you got to put a range hood in and a fire suppression system. So the amount of new equipment they need is $230,000. So that number already assumes keeping everything we can possibly keep. Kitchen equipment's expensive.
Because I would like to know for the future, I mean, what the food service equipment cost in the original plan versus now, because now it almost seems like it's another $200,000 add-on, even though we repurposed some of the equipment. I'm having a little trouble following the math.
I don't know if I would characterize it as an add-on. So the cost of the project with the scaled-down kitchen, to do the scaled-down kitchen that we've already talked about, requires $230,000 more of kitchen equipment.
But was that included in the original 4 million that was approved, or was that outside
Yes.
of the 4 million that was approved?
Well, the original $4,063,000 assumed a cooking kitchen and all the stuff that goes in it.
Right, so I guess I would characterize it as outside, if in the math, we are still coming up with another 100,000 that we need.
But we need to put 1.4 million to the whole thing, so instead of trying to reserve $850,000 from end-of-year funds to get it to 1.4, I'm saying 750 plus this other, plus the food service money. Because $850,000 makes me a little nervous from a year-end funds. And the food service fund is in the black because of everybody because we've had a good year. That's the theory.
Yeah, you go ahead. Keep going.
So moving away from food, so let's get on to the 600,000. So I guess how much, because we basically drained that fund by approving Mount Lab and the track. So how much is going to be left in there if basically we're not funding it this year? Because now we're looking at the boiler renovation at Seminary Hill School, which wasn't that 500,000 as well? It seems like we're going to be left with the renovation that needs to be done and no money.
The capital reserve fund will be essentially, for all intents and purposes, zero. It'll probably have a few $1,000s in it. But that's, yeah, I'm being honest. It was gonna be drained, and then we were gonna put 600 grand in, and we're saying we're gonna take the 600 grand out. Now, if there's money left at the end of next year's budget that the voters approve in it, by the time, so say next March, they approve $500,000, by the time this 600 grand is needed, we'll be putting that 500 grand in. Because this project will be done, remember, by the fall of 23. It's a whole year from now is my point. More than a year. But it will be, if you just take this number and not assuming that there's a March warrant article, yeah, it'll be just about drained.
Okay, Kristen is next.
Yeah, small follow-up question, which is, normally we do, the last couple years, those small little projects, end of year, like classroom renovations and this and that. Does this mean that's not gonna happen this year? Because there's no
The budget
unexpended, there's no money,
The
right?
budget that starts July 1 had classroom renovations in it.
Oh,
And
okay.
that's going forward.
Okay. So this is, sorry, okay, I get it. So this is just literally closing out.
This year, it starts
This
end
year,
of June,
all right.
right?
Go ahead, Aaron.
So is this the final increase, or down the road, are they going to come back and say, oh, we misjudged the price of this and we need more, because there is no more?
There is no more. So I would say, we need to tell them today, if you guys approve this plan, I need to tell them tonight, because they're gonna give the okay to their partners tomorrow to start moving dirt. There's contingency, built in this number, there is contingency, I think it's 5%, I'm not exactly sure the percentage, but there's typical construction contingencies to cover some unknown costs. Outside of that, a change order of significance that's not in the original plan would cost money. So we need to be careful on change orders. That's why Dana's been preaching to me for 7 years, is that change orders cost money.
Do we know what the contingency is, percentage-wise?
We have,
Usually a percentage,
I think it's 5%.
5%,
But
yes,
I'll confirm with that.
quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
I have a question, I guess it's maybe more of a political question. The voters approved $600,000 to go to the Capital Reserve Fund. They didn't approve $600,000 for Mount Lebanon renovation. Just plain devil's advocate here, do we open ourselves up to a accusation of it's almost become a cliche to talk about transparency, but I guess I don't know what else to call it.
They did grant the board the ability to access capital reserve. They basically entrusted the board with the ability to access that.
Yep.
With a public, you have to have a public hearing. So if you made a motion to do the 600 and 750 tonight, that's enough for us to give the green light, and then you'll have to have a public hearing before you take the $600,000 out of the capital reserve.
Oh, I'm not questioning whether or not we can do it.
Yeah.
We can certainly do it. I'm just pointing it out to my colleagues that that is a potential issue, maybe.
No, there's the also side of it that we were able to fund this using ESSER funds.
Mhm.
And if we don't continue, we lose how many millions in ESSER fund?
About $3 million.
Yeah, it doesn't get done at all then.
Correct.
Nothing gets done.
I mean, nobody wants to be here having this conversation, for sure. We know a lot of businesses are, including the cities, not going forward with Seminary Hill
Mhm.
because of the cost. It's very unfortunate, but I do think that we wouldn't want to lose the $3 million in ESSER fund and not have this project done and have to go back to the community to have a bond vote for it. I think that would be a challenge.
Mhm. Do you have any other information to impart, Tim, before I call for a motion?
That's enough. No, that's not.
Well, it is what it is. I mean, you know. All right, is there a motion for the use of 600,000?
I would like to have a motion for the authorization of $1.45 million, which would be $600,000 of capital reserve, $750,000 from year-end funds, and $100,000 in food service fund. That's what I'd like, if you don't mind. So I have it on record that
Yep.
we have approval for the 1.450.
So it would be to approve, say that again?
Motion to approve an additional $1,450,000 for the Mount Leb project. Funds to come, $750,000 from end-of-year funds, $600,000 from capital reserve funds, and $100,000 from the food service fund.
I can move that.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion made by Stephen, second by Aaron. Discussion.
I would just put in one more point of discussion, what you just said. I do think it's a good idea to make it clear to the public that this is what we're doing, and we kind of have to do it because we don't want to sacrifice the money from the ESSER funds, but that it's not, you know, a common practice to try and change these balances willy-nilly, so that it is kind of an emergency situation, and we need to use the capital reserve fund, which is what it's there for, to finish out a long overdue project that hopefully most people in the town support.
Point taken. The three of us who were going to get the phone call have heard you. Hearing no further discussion, we'll put it to a vote. All in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Opposed? 1. The vote is 7-1. The motion passes.
It's the most I ever want to talk.
You did well.
Thanks.
Next item on the agenda is the approval and ratification of the Lebanon School District Administrative Assistants Association contract. And I think what I'd like to do before we have a motion, let me call on the chair of the Personnel and Negotiations Committee to hit the high points for the rest of the board who may not have delved into the contract.
So, thank you. So, over a course of a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks, the personnel negotiation with superintendent and the business administrator met with our lawyers and the representatives from the Lebanon School District Administrative Assistants Association. Both sides got a chance to, air what their concerns were with the existing contract and make proposals for the coming contract. And ultimately, in a fairly cordial fashion, a tentative agreement was reached. And I can give you sort of the highlights of the agreement. We've tentatively agreed to a 4-year contract, where the previous contract had been a 3-year contract. The district will maintain the percentage of insurance premiums they cover over the course of the contract. There's no change there. And there, we've tentatively agreed to increase salaries by $1 per hour in each of the 4 years of the contract, so $4 total over the course of the contract. Overall, and Tim, please correct me, that salary increase over the course of the whole contract amounts to about $112,000.
I have 109,376.
Approximately, there you go.
27,344 a year. The warrant article will be 27,344.
Okay. Are there questions for either Stephen or Tim? I just point out that this was negotiated early. It didn't come up until next year, but we're looking at negotiating with the support staff in the fall, and this group, as well as the administrators group, agreed that we can agree to conduct these negotiations early. So we also, those who have to sit down and hammer these things out, appreciate the flexibility on everyone's part. Okay. May I have a motion then to approve this collective bargaining agreement? Stephen?
I would move to approve or ratify the tentative agreement reached between the Lebanon School District and the Administrative Assistants Association as detailed in the packet, and tentatively signed on May 20th, 2022.
Motion by Stephen, second by Mary. Any further questions or discussion? All in favor? Unanimous, 8-0. Thank you.
I do see Brooke.
Okay, perfect. Do you have to make her a presenter? If you do, then let her know first thing that she needs to turn it back to you.
Hello, Brooke. Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Welcome. Thanks for being here. I believe you're going to give us a high school track fundraising update.
I am. Thank you
Terrific.
for the opportunity. When I spoke to this group last, we were in the campaign readiness phase. So we were seeking a fiscal sponsor, growing the committee, putting together a campaign plan and timetable. And since then, the committee has made some great strides, if I could use a really bad track pun. And just as a quick reminder, there are 3 distinct phases to a campaign. So there's the campaign readiness phase, there's the planning phase, and then there's the implementation phase. And we are now in the implementation phase. So that means we're actively seeking grants from foundations, major gifts from individuals, and have begun promoting the project to the public in the Upper Valley. But I want to go back a step and give you some highlights from the planning phase so you have a better understanding of all the work that's occurred to get us to the implementation phase. So the first highlight is in partnership with our fiscal sponsor, which is the Friends of Lebanon Recs and Park. The project is fully integrated on the website friendsoflebrec.org. We assisted the selection of the Friends CRM, which is the software to accept gifts, which is Network for Good. And I have access to the back end of the platform and can view gifts, can view letters, correspondence, and run reports. We created a prospect tracking chart, which is where we record all of our prospect and donor activity. It's pretty low tech. It's actually an Excel spreadsheet, but it helps keep us on task and accountable. We created a brochure, real snappy looking brochure, and sponsorship levels. So sponsorship levels start at $1,000 and go all the way up to $50,000. And we also created a community engagement and project promotion plan. So that all happened in January, February, March, and early April. And now, as I said earlier, we're in the implementation phase. And one of the most tangible outcomes of the implementation implementation phase is that people are starting to give money to the project. So just a quick financial update for you. We've secured 29 gifts and pledges for a total of $49,105, which is about 16% of our $300,000 goal. We have 12 pending gift requests totaling $265,000. And what I mean by pending is that we've asked for the gift and are waiting for a response. And I'd say the majority of these requests are to foundations. We have 17 gift requests in process totaling about $64,000. So what I mean by in process, it means the individual has been qualified, we have a committee member assigned to make the gift request for a specific amount. I'm going to take a minute to focus on the grant requests to foundations. Two of our committee members who are SAU 88 employees, Jody Stone, who is at Mount Lev Elementary School, Library Media Specialist, and Rachel Roper, who's at Lebanon Middle School. She's also the Library Media Specialist, have worked tirelessly to research, prioritize, and apply to over 15 foundations, totaling about $312,000 in requests. So it's just been tremendous yeoman's work on their part. Some of the grant requests still pending includes a $75,000 request to the Timken Charitable Foundation, $25,000 to the Muskoma Bank Foundation, and a $10,000 request to the Couch Family Foundation, among others. We're in the process of submitting applications to Novo Nordisk and Hypertherm Hope Foundation. So that's where we stand financially, and with our grant request, I'm going to shift focus a bit and give you some highlights about community engagement and project promotion, so you have an idea of some of the scope of outreach that's taken place. The project has been promoted in all the school weekly newsletters and through an SAU 88 communication. We will have an article in the next edition of Lebanon Times, which we're real excited about. A press release has been created and has been sent to the Valley News in hopes of getting an article. We're still waiting on that. Information about the project has been posted to many of our committee member Facebook pages and on several of the local listservs. Next steps in promotion include outreach to the Upper Valley Business Association, possible radio coverage on WNTK. We've applied to have a table with other nonprofits at the Lebanon Farmers Market, and this summer we'll start planning an event for the fall to engage with the PTOs. And before I conclude and answer any questions, I wanted to share some of the comments that people are leaving as they make gifts. There's an option to make a note or a comment. And some of these comments really brings home why this project is so important and worthwhile to our community. So this is what people are saying. Donating to improve our schools and keep our kids healthy and active. Fully support this endeavor and wish I could donate more. The track program from youth through high school was so important to my child. The track benefits all athletic teams. My kids love the rec department track program. And finally, we are community members who use the track for fitness. It's a great resource. So that speaks for itself. That concludes my report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Brooke?
I just wanted to say
Yeah,
thank
Lil
you.
has one.
I just want to say thank you, Brooke. I think we are all very grateful for your guidance, and we were definitely floundering before you came on board, so we appreciate your really able assistance in this endeavor.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Anything else? Brooke, thanks so much for the report,
Thank you, Dick.
and safe travels home.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on now to first reading of several policies, which are in your packet. Hopefully, everyone's had a chance to look at them. Again, this is a first read, so no votes are necessary, but this is the opportunity to ask questions, raise objections, make corrections, and so forth. And I'll just walk through, if that okay, Kristen? I've got the list in front of me. Okay. Okay, the first was policy BGAA, Policy Development, Adoption, and Review. This is a revised policy these are all put forth by the New Hampshire School Board Association. And just by way of background, just refresh anyone's memory who hasn't been involved in policy, we generally accept pretty much as written whatever we get from New Hampshire School Board Association, so that we ensure that we're in full compliance with state and federal law. And we also have our own internal review schedule, and that's how many of these come up. So this is in the recommended category, revision, and basically contains additional detail on policy, on the role of the policy committee, which in our case reflects current practice, some other minor language changes. So we're bringing that to the board for a first read. Are there any comments or questions? Okay, this will come back to the board for a second read and a vote at our next meeting. Moving on, policy BAAA, School Board Policies and Administrative Procedures. This is a new policy in the recommended category. We never had this policy before, and basically it's more of a policy on policies. It just states the purpose of policies and the procedure for review and acceptance. Our sense was these are things that we are already doing, but it's good to have a policy that details just why we're doing this and how they're organized. So we're putting this forward for a second read at the next meeting, and again, it's a new policy for us.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Lil.
The contents of administrative job descriptions adopted by the board, that's the second paragraph under, first paragraph under contents of board policy and administrative procedure. Are those available publicly on our website anywhere? Tim, you might know.
Where paragraph are you in?
The second paragraph of the whole document. The first paragraph under contents of board policy and administrative procedure. Number 2. The contents.
Administrative job description adopted by the board. I mean, they're in a Google file, so I don't know of any legal reasons why we couldn't share that publicly.
Right, because the rest of those things are publicly shared, right? So it just feels like maybe if all the other 3 things are publicly shared, then can that be publicly shared as well?
I just got to figure out. I mean, that's easy. I think it's easy. Like, I have a Google file that I share with all the employees, and I get all these weird requests from non-SAU 88 domain names for access, and I won't give it because you're supposed to use your work email. So I'm just thinking in my head, like, how do I make sure everybody can see that? But that's the technique. So.
But it also might just be like moving it to a different kind of file and changing the permissions or something. I just think since these are public, let's make it all public.
No problem.
Well, I guess on the same token, are the employee handbooks public? I've never looked that far on the website, but I kind of was under the impression that they were not on the website.
I don't know the answer to that.
That's a good question, because it feels like if our policy is composed of those things, then again, you would want that to be public as well.
Joanne has stepped up, but Tim, could you make a note before this comes back for a second read to address those points, specifically job descriptions and employee handbooks?
I don't think it's mandated, however, in this BAAA, it just says the policies of the board shall be composed of. It doesn't say, I mean, it's not a mandate that they all have to be on there. I mean, that would be like something that we decide to do, but that's not what as far as I'm reading, that.
Right, so then
the
that's
School Board
the question, that if they're available, are they, and do we want them to be available? I
Right.
guess that's the.
Well, I would say that's a good point to include, but it's not, I mean, it's not in here, so if we're adopting this, then that would be something we'd have to add if we want to like mandate that it be kept public, or we adopt this and then we just make a decision on our own, what should be public or not. I mean, anyway, I'm
Yeah,
just saying.
no, I hear what you're saying. I think it's a matter of consistency, though. To Lil's point, we say that we have on the website all of the school board policies, and now this policy says that the policies shall be composed of, among other things, administrative job descriptions and employee handbooks. So if we say that policies are all available to the public and they contain those.
Oh,
then,
I see what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah,
The employee handbook is online.
okay,
Okay.
good.
So it's just the one then? It's just
So
the
it's just job description.
administrative job, yep. Okay. BHE, revised, Lebanon, wait a minute. I'm looking at my, oh, thanks, Joanne. BHE, school board use of email and other electronic communications. This is a revision of a recommended policy. It's a major rewrite. Primarily, it used to be just concerned with email, and now it's been expanded to include other forms of electronic communications as well. And the thrust of it seems to be the right-to-know law, that just emphasizing by putting in policy that all forms of electronic communication, including social media, are subject to right to know. And one thing that was pointed out in the guidance we received on this, which is not actually part of the procedure of the policy, is that social media posts are a problem if we unintentionally create a quorum by up to 5 board members contributing to the same thread in a social media post. So something just for all of us to be aware of. But in any event, for this policy itself, we're bringing it forward for a first read. As I mentioned, extensively rewritten, again with the emphasis on compliance with right-to-know legislation. Any comments?
I have a question.
Yeah.
In that guidance, is there a reason why they didn't specifically mention that, what you just said? Because that.
I couldn't tell you, Lil. We typically receive additional information which is not part of their policy, just explaining why they're doing it and giving examples.
Yeah, it's interesting because that particular, like commenting on a Facebook thread, does commenting include liking? If 5 of us happen to like it, you know what I mean? Like that, it seems like there's some gray area there that is either we don't want to wade into that, or they do want to wade in, one or the other. It just is interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's yeah. I mean, it gets complicated. I mean, situations change, and the range of ability to communicate is greatly expanded now than what it was even 3 or 4 years ago. We also have a different board, and you go back 3 or 4 years, and nobody was making social media posts, and so it wasn't really an issue. So. Yeah, go ahead.
The logistics of that are hard to fathom trying to comply with.
Well, someone has to look.
Well, right, but there will be someone who wants to look. But it means that, you know, that there could be a post, you know, someone posts something and it could, you know, there could be 400 comments on it. And if before any of us comments, they're suggesting that we need to go and look back through all 400 comments and make sure there aren't 4 other of our colleagues who've already commented, and we're the 5th one, and that's going to put us at risk.
This is why I never comment. Yep.
Well, it's only about school business, so if we all comment on, you know, generic things, it doesn't matter. But obviously, I think they're trying to place, this is our understanding, what we talked about in the policy meeting, they're sort of trying to place the burden on the school board members just to be careful. I mean, obviously, there's no way that we could be always in control, but to, yeah, just be aware that that's a potential risk.
Okay, anything else on that?
But Lil's point about liking is something that would be
Well, and
good to know.
simultaneous. I mean, how many times have you commented on a thread, anyone commented on a thread, and when your thread publishes, someone else was commenting at exactly the same time, right? So that you can't always know who's talked before you talk. So it just seems like a morass to sort of wade into.
Policy BBB, school board elections. This is an optional policy and a revision of that policy. There was just simply some edits to, I think, reflect changes in state law. It really doesn't change anything for us. The only thing we did do on this is to change the policy from the School Board Association refers to an odd number of members comprising the board, and we Lebanized this by saying there are 9. Okay, moving on. BBBC. I alluded to this earlier. BBBC is a revised optional procedure, board member or district officer resignation, and it's an extensive rewrite, much more detailed than what we had before, and lays out a very specific series of steps that has to happen when someone resigns from the board or resigns from one of the other offices, such as district clerk, district moderator, and so forth. And policy committee is recommending that we accept this. Okay. BBBE, unexpired term fulfillment. All this policy says is that we will fill unexpired terms in accordance with RSA 197:26. So for more detail on that, you need to consult the New Hampshire Code of whatever the equivalent of the Code of Federal Regulations is, whatever RSA means.
Statute.
Go ahead.
Statute is the word you're looking for. The New Hampshire statute. I have a question about this. So I like that BBBC is more detailed about what to do, right? I did go and consult the statute, RSA 197:26, and all it says is majority vote, period. So it doesn't give any additional information. And it occurs to me that since we have this policy and we do even right now and in the past, have a procedure that we're following, do we or should we consider putting what our procedure is so that every time this happens, we know and the public knows what policy, what procedure we're going to follow, what process we're going to follow when an expired term needs to be fulfilled?
So this would be creating a policy that does not exist. It would be a unique to us.
Well, I think it would be, the policy would be to the extent that this policy is one sentence, that one sentence would still be the policy, but we would say the steps that we take in Lebanon School District are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever they are. Because it seems like then every time this happens, we don't have to remember, okay, what do we do next? What do we, what's the next, that's the first thing we have to do. The second we have to do, if we have it, then we know it, and everyone, it's public and everyone knows.
But wouldn't that be a procedure and not a policy?
Well, that's my question. Is it a procedure or is it a policy? Because it looks like under the previous policy, BBBC, this is policy, kinds of outlining the steps is part of the policy. So I'm suggesting outlining the steps for the second policy as well. I mean, in keeping with BBBC, I hate these terms. I hate the names of these policies.
I know. Well, I suppose what we could do is, it is just a first read, but we could, if you wanted to make a motion to table this, policy committee, and then provide some text to policy committee. Policy committee is not going to meet again until September.
Which would be after we finish this process
Sure.
time. So we know for sure, yes, we like all of these steps, or we don't want to do this step next time, or whatever it is. Because then we'll have finished, we'll have filled an expired term, right?
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, I'm inclined to do that, to table this one and to make it a little more detailed, not as detailed as BBBC, but a little more detailed for us, so that every time this happens, we know what we're going to do.
Well, this is the current policy that we have now. I mean, the recommendation, right, isn't that we're keeping our own BBBE, which is our current own policy, so we don't have to actually table anything because it just is there.
Oh my goodness, you're right, Kristen.
Yeah,
I'm just reading my own minutes.
Yeah. Well,
Which is
I pulled
that
up your
the
minutes,
committee
too.
voted not to accept this and to retain
Yeah, we didn't
current
want the
policy.
huge, long one from NHS.
No, this
BA.
one, this
We
was the
want
really short one.
Short and sweet one that we already have. I think Lil's question is, the provisions, we do it in accordance with the provisions of RSA 197.26, that I don't think we have control over RSA 197.26, isn't that's coming from
Right.
the state. So if we lay out a policy, but then RSA 197.26 changes somehow, then we have to revisit our policy. So I mean, my feeling is that I don't actually know if we need to write a new policy regarding what we do, because, well, it doesn't happen that often, and also there's already a reference to go back to.
So,
I mean, I know you're trying to say we should spell it out so that it's easier, so that next time it happens, it's right in front of us, but I'm not sure if that is a necessary use of time. That's my...
I mean, I think it's happened, 4 times since 2013, so it's, it's happening every 3 years or so that we're doing this, and it seems like, looking at the sort of CATV from these last years that it happened, every single time it seems like, wait, what do we need to do now? What's the next thing we need to do? What's the next thing that happens? And so it feels like if that's happening in that kind of regularity, maybe it doesn't need to be a policy. That's my question. Does it need to be in the policy, or does it need to be like a spelled out procedure that's put somewhere else? I just don't know where those procedures even are put, right? It also, for me, it harkens to this question that Dick brought up earlier, the cliche of transparency, right? If we're going to fulfill these terms, let's make sure that everyone in the public is aware of how we fulfill these terms, so that it's not mysterious.
Let's hash this out in policy committee when we meet again. Does that sound acceptable?
Sure.
So, I'm not a parliamentarian. Do we need to vote on them? Does there need to be a motion to table? Or do we just do that by consent?
It's first reading, I think we can bring it back.
Yeah, we'll just bring it back.
Okay. Thank you. I don't mean to make more work. I just...
Okay, BEC, non-public sessions. And this is a policy that was substantially revised by the School Board Association to be consistent with the RSA code. We're recommending that it be adopted as written to stay in compliance. There was one question the last paragraph refers to something called a non-public session checklist that none of us had ever heard of. And so that's being checked into. And before we have a second read, unless you have something now, Joanne.
Yeah, I sent it to you.
I didn't read it.
Well, I will resend it. No, what it is, mine is a form that you use when you go into non-public. And so it says roll call, and you just fill it in with the board members' names. And then it says, are you going to seal minutes or not? So it's a form, so you actually have something that is easier to follow when you go into a non-public.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to.
I would love to see that. That would be great.
Okay.
And maybe I jumped that I got it, but I will try and find it. I remember seeing it.
No, you probably sent it to me.
So if someone could send it to me, that would be helpful.
Sure.
So I'm taking minutes in those meetings.
Okay. BEDG. Joanne, do you, this is, my notes say it's a considerable update in revision and revision. I don't recall that there was anything that didn't make sense here.
No, I think, yes, because I agree that it made sense. Anything that's highlighted shows a difference between what we had and what we do have. And I think anything that explains something more clearly is a good idea to have. And so, I see some things where there are some notes I need to go back in and make sure that I check before it comes back for a second reading.
Okay.
But we did review this and thought that this was really helpful to know. I think over the last, I'll make it up, so I'll just use several years, there's been a lot of questions about boards that seal minutes and then reopen minutes. And so that was part of the reason for the explanations that are in these minutes. I also think more people read minutes, and so they're trying to make it as consistent as they can for each public school.
Okay. Any questions about this, or we'll come back and vote on it when we do a second read?
Sorry, can we go back to BEC really quickly? I apologize. And I'm trying to find
To
it.
which?
BEC, the non-public session.
Yep.
So the second to the last paragraph says, the board shall require the presence of the superintendent or his or her or their designee, except in those non-public sessions. But we actually have another policy that says that the superintendent attends at our pleasure. So now we have two policies that contradict each other. I'm trying to find that other policy, so.
Oh, I thought that was the older version of this one.
I don't know that.
Because I remember that term, we brought it
Yeah.
up and we talked
Yeah.
about it.
One says the superintendent or his or her designated representative may attend all
Okay.
non-public sessions at the pleasure of the board,
Yeah.
except the ones that pertain to the superintendent's
Okay,
employment.
perfect.
So the School
this is
Board
clarifying that.
Association is recommending
That we
the
change that.
language that says, requires superintendent.
That's good. I knew I had read it somewhere, but obviously I read it in this policy in the
Yeah.
past. So that's good. Thank you.
And A on the bottom should be letter L for the action, just so you know there's the formatting.
Yeah, right, yeah, I understand. Okay, we do have we have a second read here of, finally, of,
Yes, I
Of
checked
the,
in
of
with
the-
New Hampshire
the
School Board
headlights one?
Association. And the reason the paragraph was in the bottom was because they do work with the New Hampshire, I will call it the School Nurses Association, and they had recommended the bottom paragraph that we had talked about quite a bit. So the language that I put in here that I hope meets everyone's favor is criteria. Once a student with a live lice has left the school, it is recommended that treatment with an antiparasitic drug or other proper treatment begin. The school nurse may recheck a child's head for live infestation. And so hopefully that will allow us to move forward with this policy.
can we have a motion, please, to adopt policy JLCC?
Since how I had the problem with it, I will make a motion to adopt policy JLCC.
I'll second.
Motion by MJ, second by Lil. Any further discussion? Yes,
Just
MJ.
I don't have any problems with the paragraph. So I just want to be clear, though, that was a Lebanese version of it that wasn't
This is now.
right with that last paragraph. So the New Hampshire School Board Association was still doubling down on the contradictory paragraph.
They put that one forward, and when I asked, they said that that came from that association, and that was the input, and we could do what we needed to do as a district because we oversee our own policies.
I love it. Okay, any further discussion on JLCC? Not, we'll call it for a vote. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 in favor. You? I'm in favor too. Oh, okay, 8-0. Thank you. My goodness, is Lisa opposed to it? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Also, under new business, we need a motion to approve authority for the superintendent to hire staff over the summer without coming to the board. We do this every year so that the superintendent can hire people as required without coming to the board, without convening a board meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the authority for the superintendent to hire staff over the summer.
Moved by Lil, second by Mary. Discussion, questions? All in favor? 8-0. Okay. We now have some committee updates. Finance and Facilities Committee doesn't meet again until June 2nd at 4 p.m. in the SAU office. Policy Committee met on May 12th. You just saw the fruits of our labors. And will meet again on September the 8th at 8:30 a.m. Education Committee meets next on June 6th, Monday, 4 p.m., the SAU office. Personnel and Negotiations Committee met on Thursday, May 12th, last action.
And
Yeah.
I'll be in touch to set up a meeting to talk about LAG, because we are negotiating that one as well. So we'll have LAG, Lebanon Administrators Group. All 3 were next year, and we're going to do the 2 this year.
Right. That's the other agreement, the other group that I alluded to before that we're going to do early so we don't have to do them all in the fall.
Joanne, sorry, do we have a date for the next P&N meeting?
We do not yet.
Okay.
Thank you.
Student Wellness Advisory Committee meets next in October. Is there anything new from that group?
There's a few things that we talked about the kitchen at Mount Lebanon School and the implications for cooking in it with the new size. He seemed to feel that it was possible. We also spoke about adding the social worker to the Student Wellness Committee, and that was something that Diane thought was a good idea. We talked about a campaign that would be crucial to getting parents to sign up for free and reduced lunch because they had gotten out of the habit of doing so, and that's pretty much 3 main things we talked about.
Thanks, Lisa. Harvard Area Career Technical Center meets next on September 12th. That hasn't met since the last time we gathered, has it? No. Okay. The area committee was supposed to meet yesterday at Grantham Village School. As Joanne mentioned, it was canceled fairly short notice. The reason was that the person who's currently chairing the group felt that the major agenda item that we had to discuss was possible sharing of, whether it's employees or cost sharing for various, this is something that's been discussed within area for the last couple meetings. There hadn't been any new action on that, so we felt there wasn't a whole lot of reason to gather. So by mutual consent, that meeting was canceled. And that's all the information I have about that. So far as I know, it will not meet again until the fall. City School Joint Task Force met last Thursday at City Hall. Let me give you a brief rundown. On our side, we briefed the City Council representatives to this group on the equity audit results and status of ESSER funding as well, the various construction projects we have going on. The city confirmed that they cannot go forward with the acquisition of the Seminary Hill building at this time, since, as we're seeing with other projects, the costs are coming in much higher than was projected. So that has put on hold. It has been put on hold. There is still interest on both sides, particularly on the side of the city, to in terms of better serving West Lebanon, to at some point get back and pursue that project further. Talk about expansion of the city expanding broadband access. We also talked about the various construction projects that are in the pipeline, various stages of approval by different city bodies, as well as ongoing construction. Quite a few projects in the pipeline. We will actually post this spreadsheet for the board to see. Bottom line is that most everything are low occupancy studio, 1-bedroom apartments, and the feeling is that probably will not have any major impact on enrollment in the school district in the foreseeable future. Everyone recognizes that the lack of affordable housing for families is a problem, and that's something that the city is looking into. There's some various other initiatives under consideration, and that information will be coming from the city. But I'll post this just in case anyone wants to see in one place all the various projects that are going on. The other thing that I just want to brief members of the school board on is, although it was not on the agenda, the board's action on the school resource officer was brought up, and we were, I don't think it's unfair to say, pretty strongly criticized by the two members of the city council who attended the meeting for the action that the school board took, including a suggestion that we were not acting in good faith with the voters of the city. This is a departure from the sort of discussions that we normally have in this group, and it's I mention it only because I think people need to know what the political environment is surrounding this issue right now in the city, and that this is an issue that's going to keep coming up. It's unfortunate that it came up in that particular venue and in the fashion in which it was done, but there it is. And I mention it because I don't, since it wasn't an agenda item, I'm not sure it would be captured in the minutes. I just think it's important for the board members to know that that did occur, and we'll probably hear more of it. Okay, we've had the track fundraising report. We need a non-public session now. MJ, could you put us into non-public, I think, gosh, it's either B or C.
No, let's see.
C. Under C, please.
I'd like to make a motion to enter non-public under NHRSA 91A 32C.
Motion by MJ, second by Stephen. We need a roll call. Kristen, can we start with you?
Yes.
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 For the CATV guys, this will not be too long.
Recording stopped.
Joanne?
I have to turn on the recording, et cetera.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Should I be waiting for a board member to return or not?
Let's wait for Lil to come back. Well, you can start the recording again.
It would just be empty.
Learning all my facts up there.
I know, but they're on the loop, so it sounds like.
Well, I'm wondering about the spirit days my kids don't tell me about. This is before my time.
You guys can hear me okay with my mask, right?
Just put it a little closer into the.
Okay. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Recording in progress.
Okay, we are back from non-public, and I'm now going to have the superintendent read a letter into the record.
Thank you. Dear school board members, administrators, staff members, students, families, and community members, this evening I'm announcing that the 2022-2023 school year will be my last year serving as superintendent of the Lebanon School District. Over the last 8 years, I've strived to keep our schools student-centered and improve programs district-wide. When I have conversations with individuals or a large group to discuss the current systems in place or review a procedure or policy, my goal is to listen, problem solve, understand how it impacts our students, and offer solutions to move forward from where we began, leaving the woodpile higher. I am fortunate to work with such dedicated and caring staff members. Over the last 8 years working together, we have accomplished many great things. A few of the accomplishments that stand out to me are the creation of the CARES mission statement and board diversity and inclusion statement, administration of strategic plan surveys, and development of multiple 3-year strategic plans, creation of a transparent district-wide budgeting process that is zero-based and fiscally responsible, development of a technology replacement plan, a multi-year facilities improvement plan, and updated emergency response plans. Recently approved multi-year area agreement between Plainfield, Grantham, and Lebanon. Implementation of evaluation systems for the superintendent, administrators, teachers, and paraeducators. Implementation of a valid curriculum cycle with the goal to publish the curriculum so it is readily available to all stakeholders. Improvement in providing services that fall under student supports, ELL, special education, 504, mental health services, and our preschool and intensive needs program. Support for extended learning opportunities and STEM experiences, including our partnership with Thetford Academy, Hypertherm, and Fuji. Collaboration with the Hartford Area Career and Technical Center. Efforts focused on supporting students and families through the biannual summit in collaboration with the Public Health Network, bringing local districts and social agencies together. Approval of renovation projects at Mount Lab, the high school, and Hanover Street. It took us many years, but we finally succeeded, and administrators, staff, students, and families will greatly benefit from these projects for years to come. The incredible effort to remain creative, flexible, and resourceful throughout the COVID pandemic. Together, as a district and community, we overcame the challenges and kept our focus on each other, our students, and our families. This is a pivotal moment for New Hampshire, and we need to gather together to support our public schools. We need to provide a voice for students who are underrepresented and those whose safety may be at risk. We need to provide a voice for LGBTQ+ students, for students of color, for students and families facing food and housing insecurities, for students receiving special education services whose funding sources continue to be decreased, for students and families facing mental health issues, for public school funding, for teachers who no longer teach course content because of unclear language in the divisive concepts legislation, and fear potential revocation of their certifications, and the list goes on. According to an article in the Journal of the American Medical Association, children and young people's reports of experiences of adverse childhood events have increased in recent years, and this trend has been associated with an elevated risk for suicide behaviors. From the CDC, lesbian, gay, and bisexual youth and female youth reported greater levels of poor mental health, emotional abuse by a parent or caregiver, and having attempted suicide than their counterparts. In addition, over a third, 36% of students, said they experienced racism before or during the COVID-19 pandemic. The highest levels were reported among Asian students, 64%, and Black students and students of multiple races, both 55%. From the Dartmouth Health Suicide Prevention website, suicide is the second leading cause of death for New Hampshire kids and the 9th leading cause for people of all ages. Depression, substance abuse, and other mental health problems are involved in 9 out of 10 suicide deaths and attempts. Most of the deaths are preventable. Although these facts are well known, there continue to be legislative actions to remove protections for students and penalties for school administrators and staff members who are trying to support them. Moving forward, I will continue to advocate for a student and family-centered approach. In my 9th year, I will continue to communicate with stakeholders, put forward a fiscally responsible budget, move the renovation projects forward, negotiate with Lebanon support staff members, ensure the first year of the 3-year strategic plan is in place, and work locally and at the state level to advocate for our public schools. I'm informing the board about my decision now to provide adequate time to complete the superintendent hiring process for next year. School board members, school administrators, staff members, students, and families, thank you for your dedication and hard work. I'm looking forward to seeing what we will accomplish next year. With gratitude, Dr. Joanne Roberts.
Thank you, Joanne. Okay, future agenda items, board member recommendations or questions. We do need to schedule a meeting to appoint our board vacancy. I don't think it has to be done before our next board meeting, but I do think that we do need to do this before people start traveling for vacations, end of the school year, that sort of thing, because we really need to have as many members of the board present to make this decision as we can. We've already received a number of letters of interest. Those are I think, Joanne, they're available now for people to see?
My understanding is that those that have applied, my assistant has put it into a PDF, and it is on the school board website under interim school board position.
Yeah, I'm not sure that that's been posted yet because I was looking for it. But
Okay.
if it's not there, it will be soon.
I will check. I'll email her tonight.
Right, so we can
tomorrow?
we can see who's been applying, and I'll poll everyone for your availability. I really don't want to combine this with our next board meeting, which as much as, well, we already have to do some second reads of policies, but if we add the filling the board vacancy, particularly if we have multiple candidates who have to read position statements, answer questions, then we're not going to get anything done. So I'd like to have a separate meeting for that, and I'll poll everyone, and we'll find a convenient time to do that. Both Joanne and Lil came up with a list of questions that we've used in the past, and I will propose to everyone, depending on the number of candidates we have by June 3rd, I'll propose to everyone a protocol to use and see if we can't reach agreement on that before we meet. Sound okay to everyone? Yes. Okay. Any board member comments or requests for future agenda items? Stephen?
Yeah, just not that we necessarily have to act on this, but I figure we should have the opportunity if desired. I don't know if you remember that last October, Lil and I went to the New Hampshire School Board Association delegates meeting where there was discussion and voting on adoption of resolutions. Well, as a school board, as a school district, we have the opportunity to propose resolutions or amendments to resolutions, and that submission process, that time period is now. And there's a deadline of Friday, July 15th to submit resolutions. So if people have some thoughts that we want to put forward as a district towards that school board association, now's the time to think about it.
Do you have anything in mind?
I don't.
I mean, those resolutions, we talked about this last time, but just as a review, those resolutions guide the lobbying efforts of the New Hampshire School Board Association going forward.
Yeah.
So if there's anything in particular that we feel like we want to emphasize that they continue to lobby for or lobby for anew, that would be the kind of thing that we would propose.
Well, if we don't suggest it, this can't be acted upon anyway, so that's a good point. Okay. Okay, well, anything else?
I just have one follow-up from our last meeting. I think we had asked Joanne, we had talked to you about how much classrooms were being used, how much a Google Classroom was being used in the classes. That was something you were gonna investigate. I just wondered what you had found out from your investigation.
It's mostly used at the middle and the high school level. There hasn't been a huge emphasis for elementary to keep their Google Classrooms up to date. And that's kind of where we left it, trying to get through the end of the school year as best as we could.
Okay.
As a reminder, our next meeting is June 8th. It will be here. It's our retreat. It'll basically be a meeting which will focus on board goals for the coming year. Motion to adjourn? Made by
Motion
Steve.
for adjourn.
Second by Lil. All in favor? Unanimous. We're done.
Recording stopped.
Thanks, everyone.
You almost forgot to raise your hand to adjourn.
I did.
You almost did.